Hi, beautiful people. Happy Monday. Welcome back to another episode of Soulful Living with Megs. It is so wonderful to have you here. I'm so grateful for you tuning in for today's episode and taking some time out of your schedule to connect with me. It truly means a lot. Guys, last week's episode, I had mentioned to you that I was away for the weekend, visiting my cousin, celebrating her wedding, and it was so beautiful. We went to Sun Peaks and all of that. And today I'm recording this on Canada Day, so happy Canada Day. I hope that if you guys had plans over the weekend or even today, that it has been so much fun for you. And, we're finally in summer, I feel. Like Vancouver at least is starting to get some amazing weather, so I'm hoping that it stays. And after I record this today, I'm going to go out to the park and out to the beach, and I just can't wait to be in the sun. I will probably burn as per usual, but I'm so excited to get outside and start the day and everything like that. So I hope that you are having a fantastic day. But anyways, back to the wedding. It was so beautiful. I had mentioned in last week's episode that it was beautiful. That was, of course, a pre-recording of me anticipating that it would be beautiful, and it was. The weather just before the ceremony started was spitting a little bit of rain, and so I was worried that we would have to move inside, but like 5 minutes before she walked down the aisle and we actually started, it was clear skies and beautiful sun, and it was just such a beautiful moment of connection with every single person that was there. And I had so much fun. I was dancing the night away with my poppy, and it was really fantastic to celebrate my cousin. So congratulations, Paige and Cole. I am so happy for you guys, and I can't wait for your lifetime of love and commitment to one another. And I feel very grateful to be a part of that special day. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Sun Peaks, but it's, I guess, a little ski resort. I feel like that's what it's mostly known for. It very much gives like Whistler vibes if you've been in Vancouver. And then it kind of gives like Banff and I was going to say Camrose. That is wrong. That is somewhere deep in Alberta, in the plains, in the prairies. What am I trying to think of? That place, it's not Kamloops, because that's where I went to fly on the little plane. Canmore. That's what it is. It reminds me of like, the small resort town vibes, super cute village. I found the cutest coffee shop that I'm obsessed with. They had these baked oatmeal bars with blueberry like jam-ish or something like that. Oh my gosh, so fantastic. And then they had an excellent lavender matcha latte that I had every day that I was there. It was so fantastic. And then it was just like cute vibes. Our Airbnb was nice. Every single place basically there had a hot tub, which makes sense when you're, coming from a day of skiing and you want to relax and wind down. But it was really cool. And then I had never flown into a really small airport before, and you have to fly into Kamloops, and then it's about a 45. Oh, my Auntie Karen just said love you. I love you too, Auntie Karen. I have to text her back. But yeah, you have to fly into Kamloops, and then it's about a 45-minute drive from there, so not too bad. But I had never been on such a small plane before, and there was only like 20 rows or something like that, 2-seaters as well. And I sat beside this man who basically, him and I talked the entire flight, and he was a dad. He has 2 kids that are 19, 20, he was saying, and both of them are really into sports. And we were talking about what he was doing as a career, and it was super fascinating to learn about somebody else's life. And he also carried a lot of wisdom with him that I kind of wanted to touch on today, where he was saying that, if you have mentors in your life, and he was referring to his kids, how they have all of these mentors with the sports that they play. And he was like, I know my role as a dad, that I'm here to support you and push you and tell you, things that I feel are the truth, because I want you to learn and grow. But I also know when it's time for me to step back and stay in my dad role and not be your coach and not try to give you pointers on how to, improve in your sport, in your chosen sport, because he was like, my kids have these other resources and these other mentors that I can call and say, hey, I think my kid needs help with this, and then how can you guide them? And so it was super interesting to learn about that and his perspective on it. And also it was such a good reminder, because I had mentioned to him that I was in my mid-20s, and so I'm obviously a bit older than his kids, but he was saying that, you're on a great path of your life now, of this is the time to figure it out and make mistakes and just enjoy the process, because I think that we like to be in control as much as we can be, and the unknown, of course, is very scary, but being able to enjoy this ride that we're on and to know that it only goes up from here, and to then seek guidance and lessons from people who have experienced things. And he was saying that for himself, of, I always want my kids to learn from people who have been through something or are older than them, because I feel like that's where the most wisdom comes from. I think he wasn't saying it in a way of his friends the same age as him, like, don't have wisdom about them, but if you're attaining knowledge from somebody who has gone through a similar experience or on a path that you maybe want to end up, like, you can totally learn from their path and then make your own pave way toward something that you want to achieve. And no, he was a really kind man, and I'm really happy that I sat next to him and I got to learn, and just reiterated the fact that it's time to enjoy this life as much as we can, because we only get this one beautiful life. And I've said that before, but hearing it from somebody else that was older than me, that has a lot of experience in a lot of different ways for himself, was really reassuring and really inspiring, that I can keep going on this path to pursue what I want to pursue, and then lean on the people in my life that can guide me in that way and help give me perspective on things. Yeah, really enjoyed my time this weekend, but I'm excited to get back into the routine of my life and getting on track with going to the gym, because missing it for like 2 whole days, I'm sure my body loved it, but I was so antsy to get back into my schedule. And it was so nice to go grocery shopping and pick all of my healthy produce that I love. And yeah, I'm happy that I have today off and I get to go spend some time in the sun and spend time with some of my friends today. I'm really, really excited for that. But for today's episode, I really wanted to dive into the importance of not assuming anything in the sense of other people. And it's interesting because I feel like we base a lot of our lived experiences off of assuming things, which I think in terms of yourself, if you're assuming things about your own life within yourself, I think can be really positive if we look at it from a healthy, optimistic way. But assuming things from other people isn't necessarily the most beneficial thing for us, and I think can create a lot of internal conflict. And so I want to talk about that today. But to start off this episode about assumption, I actually want to share with you a story that happened to me not long ago. It's a very silly, lighthearted story, but I went to Costco. The last time I went to Costco, I had to order an Uber back because I had too many things. And a sweet lady picked me up, which actually I believe was the first woman Uber driver. So love that. Yeah, I loved that she was a woman. But anyways, we made some small talk and nothing too crazy. I'm not far from Costco at all, so the drive home wasn't long. And when she dropped me off in the back, I was unloading my groceries, and I noticed that when I was getting out of the back seat, she was looking back like toward my direction like a few times. And I actually, like, funny enough, was assuming that she was making sure that I had grabbed all of my bags from the back seat, and then I also had some items in her trunk of her car. And she kept looking back, and I was like, oh, that's nice that she's, making sure that I'm getting all my bags. But then as I like actually get out of the car and I put all of my bags on the ground, I noticed that she was like just fixing her cover of like across the seat that she had. She had this cover that went across the entire back seat. And I realized that that was what she was looking at to make sure I hadn't like messed it up or anything. So she was straightening it out again and everything like that. So I kind of thought that was funny. I was like, oh, I just assumed that she was making sure I had all my things, but she was like focused on her own thing. And then I go to the trunk of the car and I'm unloading as much as I can with my two hands. And I'm trying to be as quick as I can so that, I don't waste her time. And I look up and I see that she's coming out of the car. And in my mind in that moment, I assumed that she was getting out to help me unload because, like, if I'm being honest here, when I take Ubers, that when I have things in the back, like I'm pretty used to people stepping out of the car and then these men would help me unload whatever I had in their trunks. And like almost every single time that's happened. So I assumed that that was going to happen again, that she was going to come out and help me. And I actually said out loud to her, I said, oh, that's so sweet of you, like to come out and help, but I actually don't need any help. I literally had one more thing left to take out. And then she said something, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. And then I realized that she was getting out because she opened her back car doors and then was actually like fully fixing the cover on her back seats. And then she drives away. We say bye, whatever. But after that, I kind of laughed to myself because I was assuming she was coming out to help me, but she wasn't. She was focused on her and focused on her vehicle and making sure everything in there was, straightened out, which totally fine. But I had realized in that moment that I assumed that someone was doing something that I likely would have done if I were in their shoes. And also I assumed that that would have happened because that has happened to me in the past of most drivers help me get out my things. And I realized as well in that moment that I really shouldn't assume anything of anyone, because assuming something is going to happen, I believe likely sets our expectations for certain events to occur. And then it opens up the possibility of disappointment if it doesn't go the way that you initially thought. And as I said in the beginning, I think we lead a lot of how we move in this world based on assumptions and assuming that, you're going to get a surprise birthday party because you think it's this brilliant idea. And how could your friends or your partner not want to throw you a surprise party? Like, how could they not think about it if you're thinking about it? Or maybe you're assuming that because you said something during an interaction with somebody that maybe you didn't know super well, that they now think of you in a certain way if you felt like you were embarrassing yourself. We can't assume that we know the outcome of something because we truly don't. And I think assuming is similar to anticipating. And I think that when we anticipate things, it can create anxiety when there truly doesn't need to be any. I think it's important not to assume because we can't constantly worry about what people are thinking based on what we're doing or what they're thinking based on what we're saying, because we can't control anybody's thoughts or anybody's actions. And 99% of the time, like, other people are thinking about themselves and they're not thinking about you. And I think that's a true statement to say because you think about yourself the majority of the time. You think about what your hair is going to look like when you leave the house. You think about how your outfit's going to look. You look at yourself in the reflections as you walk by down the street, of, at least I do. Oh my gosh. So like super vain of me or something. But I am so focused on me. And so I was just going to say it's safe to assume that other people are focused on themselves, but I think that's true in that case. And so why are we worrying about what other people are thinking about when they're in their own little world, focusing on themselves and building this, chapter book of life? If you're at the gym, you're focused on your workout and you're focused on what your form looks like, and you probably barely pay attention to anybody else. And so why are we assuming that other people are focused on us when we're working out, or they're thinking in their head, oh my gosh, her form sucks. Like, we're most likely thinking about that within ourselves only, and that everybody is just focusing on themselves. I think that there are some negative side effects with assuming, and I was looking into a few articles online that kind of back up that belief that I have, and I was reading this article that I will, of course, tag in the show notes below, and it states that we too easily confuse these psychological mechanisms with reality, and the assumptions that spring from them become the basis of our own version of reality, even though it's not actually real. We don't recognize just how much our inner world is coloring the way that we see and understand our outer world, and how it distorts things for us. When making assumptions becomes a habit, we are less and less grounded in reality and more prone to creating problems for ourselves and for others. I liked this and I wanted to bring that part of the article in because I totally agree with it. If we don't fact check for ourselves and we're solely basing something off of our own living experiences, I think we'll make decisions and assumptions based off of our emotions and our expectations, which can then again result in this disappointment. I do believe, of course, this is a lot easier said than done, and I think many people tend to live in how their experience of the world is, and then decides how people operate. And I think that is common because we don't really know any experience other than our own lived-in experience. But if we aren't being mindful of how rational we're being, then I think that it is easy to go on a path of assuming so many things because we believe that everything we're thinking is the truth when it might not be. And I think two things can be true at the same time. I'm a big believer in that. And I think your truth is very important to live through, but I think it needs to be grounded in this reality and making sure that you are fact checking, you are learning, you are reading upon things based on studies that can kind of shape how you believe and think. Assuming can also lead to jumping to conclusions, which I think can then lead to taking things very personally. And I kind of struggle with this a lot of the time. I pick up on energy very easily, and I think that can lead me to assuming how others feel based on how I feel by their energy. And that can then spiral me into taking things extremely personally and then thinking that I need to solve all of these problems to keep this atmosphere around me as peaceful as I can, or I then assume that because somebody's energy is negative and they're in a bad mood that it suddenly has to do with me, when in reality they are likely just projecting. And I think a lot of the time they are projecting how themselves on the inside feels, but I assume that it's about me and then it's my job to fix, which isn't beneficial for me and my mental well-being. So if you felt like that before and you feel like you have to be this mediator of peace and you have to create a safe atmosphere because you sense this energy shifting and you think it's because of you, like, I think that can take a toll on your physical body, but then also how you feel energetically within yourself. And assuming how others are feeling based on this energy that you're picking up, I don't think is productive, because I think it ultimately leads to more thinking and more overthinking. And I was reading this other article by the Four Agreements, actually. This is a novel that I actually have in my room right now. I read this book. It's short, but I recommend it. It was very insightful. And it stated that thinking can lead to fear. And I think that's so true. And speaking of novels, I read this other book called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And this one, I highly recommend it, as it talks a lot about our thoughts. And while they seem very real because they are our thoughts, they're not necessarily reality. But because we assume that they are, I think that can turn into suffering. And I think that this can go hand in hand with assuming, because if we're in our heads assuming a certain situation and we're thinking about this constantly, then our thoughts are controlling how we perceive the world, and it may not necessarily be this true reflection. And the example that I can think of in my head right now is, you know, if you're feeling overwhelmed in life at home or at work or something like that, you're going through a really difficult moment in time. And you're assuming that based on this negative experience that you have, that everything right now is going to crap. You're assuming that you're going to just have this bad day because this part of your morning seems way too stressful to kind of navigate through. But oftentimes when we do pass through that obstacle and we overcome that barrier, we often say to ourselves, oh, it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like, we often resort back to saying, I was able to figure that out and it really wasn't that bad, but the thoughts in my head created this reality that I truly believed that this was going to take over or become much more difficult to solve, when in fact you already have the tools within you to overcome. And slowing that down and understanding that you can navigate this and shift your perspective. And just because you're thinking this thing in this moment when something's difficult doesn't mean that that's the outcome for the rest of the day. You know what I mean? So I really highly recommend that book. And I think it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about today. But going back to the 4 agreements, I'll read a part of what they said here, but it says, humans have a need to explain and justify everything. I mean, so true. We have a need for knowledge, and we make assumptions to fulfill our need to know. We don't care whether the knowledge is true or not. Truth or fiction, we believe 100% in what we believe, and we go on believing it because just having knowledge makes us feel safe. There are so many things that the mind cannot explain. We have all of these questions that need answers, but instead of asking questions when we don't know something, we make all sorts of assumptions. If we just ask questions, we won't have to make assumptions. Oh, that's so true. It's always better to ask and be clear. If we don't make assumptions, we can focus our attention on the truth, not on what we think is the truth. Then we see life the way it is, not the way we want to see it. When we don't believe our assumptions, the power of our belief that we invested in them returns to us. And when we recover all of the energy that we invested in making assumptions, we can use that energy to create a new dream, our personal heaven. Don't make assumptions. I loved that part in this article because I think it makes a lot of sense, and the importance of asking questions to find the answers. Like, how much easier would we be? We wouldn't feel that we need to be in this suffering or in this constant emotional turmoil because we're too scared to ask a question and that we already assume some answer for. And, you know, it might not even be the answer that you're assuming. And similar to the first article that we had talked about earlier today, like, assumptions are based off of what our truth is. And by not asking the questions to find out what the truth is, creates an opinion or belief. And then that, I think, gets stuck in our head. And then we overthink and then we believe, like, yes, this has to be true because these are my beliefs. But being open to the idea that not everything you think is reality, I think, is super crucial and important to remember. Assuming without any observation or investigation can create a lot of unnecessary conflict, which we absolutely kind of talked about earlier. And while the story that I shared with you at the beginning of this episode was a very lighthearted and silly one and truly didn't result in me feeling disappointed or upset at all, it was still an important reminder as to why I shouldn't assume. And I'm hoping that you can pinpoint back to a certain point in time in your life where you were assuming the outcome of something, or assuming how somebody felt, or assuming what somebody else was thinking, which then I think which then led you to feeling even greater feelings of anguish and conflict because you're stuck in that kind of fight or flight mode of what is this person thinking, what event is going to happen, and then it gets you in your head. One of my friends, Camilla, I was on the phone with her before I sat down to record this, and she was asking what episode I was going to talk about or what topic I was going to talk about in the pod today, and I had said the importance of not assuming, and she was like, oh my goodness, I love this idea. I think that the negative side of assuming things from other people is very prevalent, but she had spun another idea to me that I didn't really think about when I was researching this topic. I was focused on assuming based on other people's experiences and assuming events because of other people. And she was saying how I think if you turn inward and assume things in your life that in a positive way that everything will work out for you, that creates confidence and motivation. And I loved it. And I can't believe I didn't think about that either, because I'm such a, affirmations person. I believe in affirming to myself that things will work out, that I will always end up okay. And I think I often assume in my life that everything will work out because that's a belief that I have. And I think that does attribute to me feeling confident in how I then create my reality in a positive way and how I can achieve things. And so Camilla's point of positive assumptions within yourself creates that confidence and that belief that you can succeed, also kind of maintains us to be in this locus of control. And I ended up looking online before we started about the positive sides of assuming things for yourself. And it definitely fosters optimism, motivation, and then positive expectations. And I think, some positive benefits that I was reading about was it can increase your motivation, encouraging yourself, like through especially challenging moments, that you can persevere through all of the setbacks in life. And I had this lawyer, I never worked with him, and he worked upstairs, and every day that he came in, he was such a positive man. The words of wisdom that he carried with him was so inspiring. He was also a very creative mind, body, and spirit, I believed, and he loved film and making movies, and such a cool life that he lives. But I remember one day I was having a really difficult time, and you could definitely see it on my face because you can always tell when I'm crying. And I told him, I'm just having a really difficult time today trying to navigate whatever I was dealing with. And he comes downstairs not long after that interaction, and he had this printout of a photo, and it was a big boulder in the middle of the road. And it said, the obstacle is the path. And I just loved that reminder. And I think that through positive assumptions that you will make it through, you will make it through, and that the obstacle is this path that we need to navigate and persevere through, no matter how many of them we come across in our road. Like, I think that there are challenges and setbacks in life that's inevitable that we'll deal with, but being able to maintain, I think, a healthy, positive outlook on life can create that optimistic perspective that can enhance our overall happiness and well-being. And I think that it can reduce anxiety if we're thinking in our head, this will work out for me. Even though I can't see what this outcome will be, it will work out for me. And I think it can also enhance your relationships with people and enhance your creativity because you are leading a life of this healthy optimism, and you are creating relationships with communication, and you're asking these questions to gain the knowledge to understand instead of assuming. And I think that there's a lot of positive outlooks of assuming in your life. And I think that it can kind of go the opposite way as well, of your thoughts do create your reality. And I think the book that I had read, Don't Believe Everything You Think, is important to remember that not everything maybe is real and is what reality is. I do think that if you look at it in the sense of what you're constantly telling your brain and body, like, you will start to believe it, and you will the universe will give you things to remind you that these thoughts are within your control, and that if you're thinking these positive outcomes will happen, they will likely keep showing you all of these answers as to why your life is full of vibrancy and full of success. But I think there's a fine line where if you're assuming that nothing works out for you and that you have the worst luck and that you won't succeed and that it's too hard and it could never be you, I definitely think that that could get you stuck in a state of negativity and not give you a drive to motivate yourself to push through and attain the things that you want to attain, because it is too quote unquote hard, because you're assuming that based on a negative experience in the past that nothing will work out for you. And I think that can also kind of lead to you assuming everybody's reality is like that, and that every situation that you encounter with somebody, that you're assuming this negative side effect will happen. And then it kind of does, because I do think the universe shows you those things too, and will keep bringing people in your life to remind you of these thoughts and how they do create your reality. But we can shift these thoughts into a more positive outlook, and making sure that you are setting realistic expectations, but also not ignoring these signs, not ignoring potential risks or warnings that could come into your life. Like, I think putting faith into the universe that things will work out is so important, but you also have to have this healthy optimism with it, of like, you need to be grounded in the sense of evidence based on experience and not only wishful thinking, if that makes sense. And I think that assuming a lot of things that will happen in your life, I think if you're not doing the active steps to move forward to achieve those things, like, I think can result in disappointment as well. Not just like a disappointment in others that they're not doing something that you're thinking, but like, if you just have wishful thinking that something will work out for me and then do nothing to guide you on that path, I think you will be disappointed. I don't think life works in the way of you're saying out loud, I want this thing, and you say it one time and then do none of the work to build yourself up to that. Like, it doesn't work like that. And so it's a balancing act of being positive and thinking positive thoughts, but being realistic at the same time that there are going to be potential roadblocks that come up. But these obstacles can teach us that they are this path and that we have these tools to navigate through. I hope moving forward that you can remind yourself that you're in control of only one person, yourself. And just because you would do something like some type of kind gesture for somebody else doesn't mean that they would necessarily do the same for you. And just because your experience of an event is your truth, it doesn't mean that somebody else's experience is the same truth. It doesn't mean that it is the big truth, because what is considered the truth? And I think only God in the universe knows what the actual truth is. And as I mentioned before, I'm this big believer that two things can be true at the same time. And Sid's gonna walk in the house. I knew you were gonna walk in the house. Hi. That was funny that she came in. I heard her keys jingle in the door. Anyways, your lived experience of the world is a powerful tool of how you operate, but refusing to see any other perspective or truth just because it's not yours, I think can create a slippery slope of assuming. And while your beautiful world is so colorful and so bright, I think so is everybody else's. And bringing awareness and mindfulness into every situation that you are blessed to be a part of, I think is such an incredible quality to possess. You guys, that is what I have for you for today's episode on the importance of not assuming, and also just to shed light on the negative effects of assuming, and also how we can maybe have these positive assumptions that our life will work out how it's meant to, because I do believe that everything will always work out and you will always end up okay. And I think that you guys are you're so incredible and so inspiring in your own ways. And I hope that you continue to believe that within yourself, that you have so much power within you. I hope that your week is filled with endless opportunities of joy and love and light. And I'm sending all of that energy to you. And so I hope that you feel it. And I hope that your time in the sun, since it's summer out now, is so spectacular. And my Calgary friends who are going to Stampede this week, I believe that it starts on Thursday. I guess you're hearing it, so it would have started last week. I hope that it's so much fun I'll be back in town one day for another stampede. I haven't been since like 2019. So crazy. But I hope that everything is so fantastic for you this week, and I will talk to you in the very next episode. Okay, bye.